Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Girls Night. In this episode, we are going to discuss the different ways that self-help and self-improvement, that whole industry, can be really helpful, but also the trap of it, so how it can actually do the opposite of what is intended by it. And this is actually a revelation that I had really recently about what was going on with me in this regard. So I am very happy to share with y'all and to get started. So here's the episode. Hi everyone. Life can get a little crazy, so let's talk about it. If you're ready to dive deeper, talk about what really matters, and feel a little more empowered, then you're in the right place. I'm your host, Carley Doxtator. I'm a life coach, baker, dog mom of 2, and you're always there for you gal pal. And I'm so excited to have you join me. So grab your fuzzy socks, put on your comfy pants, and let's have girls' night. So as you can tell by the title, this week's episode is all about self-help and the disadvantages of it, really. I wanted to do this episode because I have been on a huge self-help kick for the longest time now. All of the books I have been reading have been self-help. I've been really diving into it, and self-improvement. I'm going to use those two terms interchangeably, but really I mean the same genre, the same kind of thing. Self-help, self-improvement, all of that jazz. I've been really diving into it, and I see now where I'm standing. I had an epiphany like earlier this week, really, that all the self-help that I was indulging in wasn't really helping myself. So I wondered why that was, and I wanted to dive a little bit deeper. So that's what this episode is all about. And before we dive into the disadvantages, I think that there really is some great advantages to self-help and to self-improvement, and there's a really good time and there's a really good place for it. Not bashing on self-help. As I just said, your girl loves it. But I think that there can be a point where you overindulge or you do too much. And that kind of goes for everything in life. It goes for candy, it goes for desserts, it goes for exercise, it goes for sleep. Anything in too big of an amount and too much at once can be bad for you. And I think self-help is really great for your own self-exploration. And especially if you are just starting out, really starting to take a look at yourself and what your values are, what your morals are, what you're really wanting to make your life into, I think that this is a really good place to start because there are so many books out there. There are so many resources for you to start exploring that deeper part of yourself. And if you don't know yourself, as we all know, none of your other relationships are really going to thrive if you don't show up as you are, knowing who you are. So that's one of the things that I believe self-help is a really great thing for. And also, if you don't have enough money for a therapist or an EFT practitioner or whatever it is, then this is also a really good place to start before you make the jump to make that investment. And I personally am a huge fan of EFT tapping. So EFT is emotional freedom technique. It works a lot better for me than traditional talk therapy does. So as you're exploring around, self-help gives you another avenue to explore all those things and see which modality really works for you. I also read that self-help has the greatest success with people who have high motivation, resourcefulness, and positive attitudes in general toward the self-help treatments that you are reading about. So in essence, if you are a person who is already motivated and already wanting to make a change and look into yourself, then the self-help books and the self-help resources can be really valuable because it's providing you with some direction to help you in your exploration and your changes. But where I went wrong in all of this is, like I mentioned before, I I think I just did too much of it because I was reading self-help book after self-help book after self-help book, listening to all these self-help podcasts. Everything that I was doing was all self-help. I thought they were really interesting. All the books were really interesting, and there were some points that really stood out to me in each and every book, but I got to a point where I wasn't finishing the books I was starting. I would start it, I wouldn't finish it. Partway through the book, I would go start a different self-help book. I wouldn't finish it. I mean, even right now, I have like 3 or 4 books, self-help books that are partially read, scattered around my house. I truly believe this is because I have just overloaded myself with the self-help and all the information. So my body and my brain was quite literally telling me, like, stop doing this. There was so much resistance to it because I have just done too much. And the problem with it is that I was doing so much all at once, one after the other, is that, yeah, I was reading it, but I wasn't putting all of these concepts that I was learning about into action. And that's the really important part of self-help, is to put the things that you're learning about into action, to try them out, to see if it works for you. And I was reading so many different things and so many different pieces of advice and things that you can do that I was reading about them and then forgetting about them. It was almost like studying for the test, right? When you're in school, you cram before the test, you mark all the answers on the test. When the class is done, you're like, I have no fucking idea what I learned in that class besides maybe a few key pieces of information. So that was my first mistake, was to overindulge in the self-help books and to not put all of the things that I was learning into action to see what worked for me. And further, the more I read all of these self-help books, the more I felt like I just wasn't good enough, and the more I felt like I had to change myself. And yeah, I think it's great to grow, but at a certain point, you gotta just love and accept yourself for who you are right now. Self-help be damned. Because if we are constantly trying to improve ourselves and change ourselves, then we're never going to get anywhere. We're just going to be caught in this spiral, this whirlpool of, oh, I can do this to feel better, but oh, I still need to change, but oh, then I can do this, but oh, but I still need to change. And it's just this whole cycle that you never get out of. And I think a lot of the time people start diving into self-help and self-improvement when they're already going through a hard time and indulging in so many different things that are telling you to be different and change who you are in so many different ways only worsens the vulnerable state that you're already in. And you get lost in it. You get lost in trying to be what everyone else is saying you should be, and you forget who you are. The word should, I also have an issue with. That is probably my least favorite word in the English language, is should. I could do a whole podcast episode on that itself, and I probably will, so I won't rant about it right now. But do not get lost in who other people think you should be. There is no such thing as should. There is just who you are and who you want to be and what you want to make your life into. But I think back on it, and I think getting lost in it, overindulging in it, at least the point where I was at, it felt like that was just kind of part of the process for me, going through all the self-help, trying to completely change who you are, just to come back and say, you know what? I actually love who I am, and I don't think I need to change myself anymore. And finally, you're in a place of acceptance. And that's kind of the whole purpose of self-help, really in a broader sense, is to come to a place where you are accepting of yourself, all of your flaws, your good side, your bad side, the in-between, all of it. That's kind of just the goal, is to love and accept yourself unconditionally. And when I was doing all the self-help stuff, it's been so long of me doing it, probably like 2 years, something like that. More recently, I got into it even more so, or maybe like the past year I was really, really into it. But everything got to a point where I was feeling like I wasn't good enough, or like there was something wrong with me all the time. And I had a couple moments where I thought back, I was like, I have never felt this way about myself. Why do I feel this way about myself? Why am I feeling so loathing towards myself and being so critical of myself? And hell, of course I felt that way. How else was I going to feel when I was constantly telling myself that I needed to improve and to be better? And it's really easy to hide behind the self-help because you sit there and you're like, look at me, look at all the books that I'm reading, look at all I'm learning, and look at what I'm doing, and look at this and look at that. But if you're reading the books and not actually doing the internal work, nothing is going to actually change. So here you've spent all this time, quote unquote, improving yourself when really you were just running away from yourself and using the self-help as another way to hide. And that's exactly what I was doing. I was hiding behind the self-help. I got this holier than thou attitude about myself, which I really didn't think I did until I'm looking back now. I'm like, oh, wow, yeah, I kind of did have that attitude towards people, not on purpose. But I realized I was hiding behind the self-help because I still felt icky inside. I still felt like, why is this not working? Why do I still feel so angry? Why do I still feel so unlike myself? And I paused, and that's when I realized that I wasn't actually doing the work. I was just distracting myself from it. But when you stop trying to change yourself, you are able to just sit with yourself. And that's where the true healing actually starts to happen. And it's really easy to hide behind the self-help at times because it can be really scary to dive deep into those emotions that we don't want to feel, especially if we went through something that was really painful. We don't want to feel that pain again. But in order to heal the pain, you have to be able to revisit it and you have to feel it again. And just because you're distracting yourself from it in the moment does not mean that pain or whatever it is that you're healing or working through is going to go away. It's still going to be there at the end of the day and when you run out of distractions. And another thing with self-help books and the self-help, self-improvement industry, or just the idea in general, is that it emphasizes the self. And that inherently does not sound like a bad thing, which it is not. It is very important to have your own identity. It's very important to have a solid, sturdy, strong foundation with your identity as well, to have those strong boundaries with yourself and what you accept, and to understand your values and morals. All of that is all your own decisions. Other people can't decide your own values for you. Of course, you can be influenced by outside things, but those internal values, those internal morals are all your own. So yes, having a good relationship with the self, with yourself, is extremely important. But relationships and connection with others is also very, very important. And there are certain things that can only be learned and can only be healed with the help of others. Take friendships, for example. You can read all the books on how to make friends and influence people and how to be a good friend, but I'll be damned if you are actually going to make any deep, meaningful friendships just by sitting in your room talking to yourself. You're not actually going to get anywhere with any of the ideas that you're reading about if you aren't actually interacting and being honest with your friends in the process. And another very subtle danger that lurks here is hiding your true self and trying to be the person that the page in the book said you should be. And that is just going to set you up for a doomed friendship from the beginning. Or if you already had some good friends and you're trying to be a better friend or form even deeper connections with them, that's just going to make it crumble if you start being somebody that truly isn't you. And there is no such thing as a perfect friend anyways, right? And I think that's a mindset that can be easy to get caught in when it comes to self-help, because you are always striving for better. You are always striving to be this perfect person. And also, sometimes our friends can see the light in us that we can't yet see in ourselves. Our friends are going to push us to grow in ways that we could never do on our own. So yeah, it's great to have a really good relationship with the self, but it is also so important to have a good relationship with others and to involve other people in your healing process. Because the people we love, our friends, they want to see all of us. They want to see all of the sides of us. The more that you can open yourself up to sharing that with other people around you that you trust, the more trust spreads and the more that the love will grow for both them and for yourself. Because you'll all of a sudden see that all these things that you were so ashamed of, all these things that you were trying to change about yourself, aren't actually so shameful. They're just who you are. It's just experiences that made you into the person that you are today. And that is a beautiful thing. And there is a way to go about it in a more healthy way. I was talking to my sister about this just this past weekend, actually, and she was telling me how she will basically have 3 books going at a time and kind of bounce between them. One self-help book, one book just for pleasure, and then another book for like career or business or something like that. And that is a really great way to approach it if you want to dive into self-help. I would not recommend doing it the way that I did it because, like I said, I overloaded it and I don't think I approached it in the appropriate way, just reading self-help books all the time, because now I honestly don't even want to pick one up. It's kind of when you eat the same flavor ice cream, like way too much of it, and you end up making yourself throw up and you never want to eat it again. That's kind of how it feels. So when you take a balanced approach to self-help, but do it in moderation, that is when you will get the most effectiveness out of it. And I actually have to say, I've stopped reading the self-help books, but the most recent book that I read just simply for pleasure is A Court of Thorns and Roses. My friend Kaylin actually recommended this to me. She said it's blowing up on TikTok, which I really don't go on TikTok almost ever, so I guess I'm behind the times. But this book was so nice to just read it and to be indulged in it completely. And I have to say, reading it actually helped me work through a lot of things that I have been avoiding, because it sparked ideas in my mind and I could relate with the characters in it in ways where I was like, oh shit, like this is how I've been showing up. This is how I've been behaving. And it was just different, right? Because when you're reading a book like that, a book of fantasy or whatever genre you like to read, you get so indulged in the story. Your mind relates with the main character, almost like you're the main character, and that's basically your world. And so that helped me work through a lot of things very swiftly when I was reading through it. And so with a book like this, a fiction book, it actually is sparking your own imagination and making your own brain work and for the cogs to turn rather than just reading about somebody else's experience. So both have a place, but they're different. So that's something to try on too, is just reading books and maybe relating to see how you fit in with the other characters and see how that fits in with how you've been showing up in your life. I will, however, include some links to some of my favorite self-help books, not so you can overindulge, but just so you have some things, some resources in case you do want to start going down there, and to do it in moderation, like I said. But keep these things in mind that we've talked about, not to overdo it. And I'm also going to include a link to that book that I just read because it's a whole series and I'm obsessed. And I know this is a shorter episode for me, but final reminder is that life is too serious to be taken so seriously. You do not have to be improving or growing all the time. It is okay to just simply be. You can be happy, just be sad, cry at a movie, laugh until your stomach hurts with your friends, drink a glass of wine for God's sake. Life does not have to be so serious all the time. And that is what I'm going to leave you with at the end of this episode. Thanks so much for listening, guys. Hope this helped. Bye. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you liked what you heard, then go ahead and subscribe so you get updates with us every week. You can also follow us on Instagram at KRC Coaching. If you're interested in working one-on-one, then go ahead and visit our website, krccoaching.com, to book your first 30-minute session for free. All right, thanks so much, you guys. Love you. Bye.